Sometime in the middle of November this year, a new kind of company becomes possible in India. Not a fintech, not another wallet, a company whose entire business is holding the keys to your consent. 12 months from the day the DPDP rules were notified, the Data Protection Board starts accepting applications from entities that want to register as consent managers. That window opens this November, 4 months from today, and whoever gets these licenses first will sit between millions of Indians and every company that wants their data. The government knows exactly how much power that is, which is why the entry conditions read less like a startup checklist and more like a banking license. Let me take you inside them. Some of what's in the first schedule has barely been reported anywhere. Namaskar and welcome to DPDP Daily. I write on India's data protection law, and this podcast has one job: taking the DPDP Act out of the statute book and into the hands of the people who have to live with it. 30 seconds of orientation. The Act passed in August 2023, then waited 2 years for its rules. In November 2025, the government notified them and switched the machinery on in phases. Phase 1, immediate, the Data Protection Board came into existence. Phase 3, May 2027. The substantive obligations bite: notices, consent, security, breach reporting, the works. But sandwiched between them is Phase 2, and it gets far less attention than it deserves. From mid-November this year, registration opens for consent managers. What happens between this November and next May will shape how consent works in this country for a generation. Think about your own digital life. How many companies hold some version of your consent right now? Banks, insurers, e-commerce platforms, hospital portals, that fitness app you deleted in 2024, 50, 100? Could you find the withdrawal button on even 10 of them? That's the problem this institution exists to solve. Under Section 6 of the Act, you can give, manage, review, and withdraw consent through a consent manager, a board-registered platform, one dashboard, every consent visible in one place, with a working off switch for each. The rules add the operational spine. Withdrawal must be as easy as the original yes, and the platform must let you exercise your rights and complain to the board. India ran this experiment once before in finance. The account aggregator framework let you share bank data through a licensed intermediary with consent as the currency. The consent manager is that idea, generalized to the whole economy. In my book, I call it India's most original contribution to global privacy architecture. No other major regime, not even the GDPR, built a licensed, interoperable consent layer into the statute itself. One clarification, because I see it confused constantly. This is optional infrastructure for the citizen, not a mandatory toll gate for every consent in India. Companies can still collect consent directly. What you get is a regulated alternative, and if it works, consent becomes portable and honest in a way scattered checkboxes never were. Now the part that's barely been covered: who gets to play? Rule 4 sets the process. Apply to the board. The board inquires. Satisfied applicants get registered and published on its website. But the conditions in Part A of the first schedule are where the government's thinking shows. You must be a company incorporated in India, not a foreign entity, not an LLP, an Indian company. The global privacy tech vendors cannot register directly. If they want in, it's through Indian incorporated ventures. Net worth of at least 2 crore rupees, defined precisely as assets minus liabilities on your books. Not venture scale money, but a deliberate filter. This is not a market for 2 founders and a laptop. Then the character tests, drafted in language lifted straight from financial regulation. Sound financial condition and management. Directors and senior personnel with a reputation for fairness and integrity. Adequate capital structure and earning prospects. If you've read an NBFC licensing framework, you're smiling. This is a fit and proper regime. The board judges your people and your balance sheet, not just your software. And then my favorite, the one almost nobody has written about: Your memorandum and articles of association, your company's constitutional documents, must lock in your core consent manager obligations, and those provisions can only be amended with the previous approval of the board. Sit with that. The regulator gets a veto over your company's constitution. It exists to stop a registered platform from quietly rewriting its own rulebook after winning the license. Finally, independent certification. Your interoperable platform must be certified against data protection standards published by the board. And here's the catch: as of this recording, that standards framework hasn't been published. Every serious applicant is waiting for it. Whatever the calendar says, that publication is the real starting gun. Clear the gate, and Part B of the schedule takes over. The obligation everyone quotes is the 7-year consent log. Every consent given, managed, or withdrawn, recorded and retained. Think about what that log becomes in a dispute. When a company claims it had consent and a citizen says otherwise, the consent manager's record is the neutral evidence both sides reach for. These platforms will become the enforcement system's favorite witnesses. The conflict of interest rules go after hidden entanglements with real specificity. Disclosure of any company where the platform's promoters or senior management hold more than 2% shareholding. 2%. The drafters were worried about exactly what you'd imagine: a consent platform quietly owned by the businesses it polices, audits run on a loop and report to the board, and you cannot sell or merge a registered consent manager without the board's prior approval. No building the license and flipping the company. Suspension and cancellation sit at the top of the ladder with hearings and written reasons. Everything about this design says regulated infrastructure, not an app category. For large fiduciaries, banks, insurers, telecoms, consumer platforms, the question is integration. When these platforms go live, citizens can route consent through them, and your systems will need to speak to registered platforms through whatever standards the board publishes. Treat the runway as the project. Put Consent Manager integration into your May 2027 architecture now with a named owner. And notice the upside: that 7-year neutral log may be the best defense evidence you'll ever have when a consent dispute lands before the board. For founders and investors eyeing this market, the ticket is 2 crore of net worth, a fit and proper team, a certifiable platform, and constitutional documents the board controls. The prize is a licensed position in what could become national consent infrastructure. The unsolved question is the business model. Who pays the consent manager? The Act makes it accountable to the citizen, and the conflict rules limit cozy revenue arrangements with the companies. Account aggregators wrestled with the same economics for years before finding their footing. Study that history before you commit capital, and expect the same curve: a small first cohort, a quiet year of integration engineering, then the consumer visible phase. For small businesses, honestly, nothing to do this year. Integration pressure lands on the big platforms first. Your energy belongs on the May 2027 basics: notice, consent records, security hygiene, deletion. But learn the vocabulary, because your customers will start using it. And for citizens, this is the part of the framework built for you. Within a year or so, one dashboard should show the consents scattered across your digital life, with withdrawal switches that actually work. When registered names start appearing on the board's website, check that list. Those names will end up mattering in your life the way UPI apps came to matter. 5 things to carry out of this episode. 1. Consent Manager registration opens mid-November, 12 months from the rules notification, the second of 3 phases before full compliance in May 2027. 2. A Consent Manager is a board-registered dashboard for giving, reviewing, and withdrawing consent across companies. Optional for citizens, never a mandatory toll gate. 3. The entry conditions are a fit and proper regime: Indian incorporation, 2 crore net worth, board-controlled constitutional documents, and certification against standards, the board hasn't yet published. That publication is the real starting gun. Watch for it. 4. Life after the license means 7-year consent logs, 2% shareholding disclosures, recurring audits, and no change of control without the board's approval. 5. Big fiduciaries should plan integration now. Founders should solve the business model before the net worth. Small businesses should stay focused on the 2027 basics. Citizens should watch the board's website for the first registered names. People keep describing the DPDP framework as India importing global privacy law. Episodes like this one are why I push back. Nobody else built a license consent layer into their statute. It may stumble the way account aggregators stumbled early, and the economics are unsolved, but it's genuinely ours, and this November it stops being a concept and starts taking applications. Everything today comes from my book, the DPDP Act Compliance Handbook, From Law to Ground Reality, where the consent chapter carries the full first schedule breakdown and the integration checklists. Tomorrow, the clock itself. We're inside 10 months to May 2027, and I'll lay out the month-by-month sequence a company should be running from today. What's still comfortable, what's already urgent, and what genuinely won't fit if you start after Diwali. If someone you know keeps saying, "We'll look at DPDP next quarter," send them tomorrow's episode. I'll see you then.